Hello, welcome to QTV. I am Mamadou Mboj. Today, this is a program organized by NALA and UNICEF. NALA is the National Agency for Legal Aid, and UNICEF, and it is part of a program of our child-friendly justice system awareness project in the Gambia. And today's discussion, the topic for discussion is the aim of the juvenile justice system in the Gambia. And I've got here three gentlemen who would help us unpick really that apparently sounding aim. I have here on my immediate right, Mr. Modu Smare. He's a protection officer at the Department of Social Welfare. And sitting on his right is Mr. Bikai Sedi. He is a legal officer at the National Agency for Legal Aid. And here on my left, I've got Mr. Mohammed B. Sow. He's a state counsel representing the Gambia Bar Association. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mboj.
So we'll start right away. We have quite so please, what do we mean by child juvenile friendly justice system? How is it established? Do I begin with you?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mboj. The juvenile justice system basically is about the legal instruments, laws, policies, the actors and strategies that are put in place, to make sure children, protected as far as the law is concerned, on equal footing, and make sure justice is served, at every given period of time in a manner and, way that serve the best interest of the children or the child, concerned.
Absolutely.
Yeah, basically that is what, it's all about.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in that way, one might ask, what does it mean for the children?
Essentially, Mr. Mboj, when you say the juvenile justice system, it has different actors and different components that consist of the juvenile justice system. You have the police, you have the judiciary, you have the Department of Social Welfare, who also have probation officers and social workers who help juvenile offenders or juvenile offenders or victims through the justice through the justice system. And then we have actors from MOJ to Ministry of Justice, where you have prosecutors. This system it consists of a court that we call the juvenile court, and then this court also it has a panel of 3 members, as different to other courts where you'll find only a lone judge sitting or a magistrate. So this panel consists of, usually you have a first-class magistrate who presides over the panel and is assisted by 2 panel members. Of these panel members, a woman must be part of these panel members. This is another component of the juvenile justice system. Maybe I'll allow my colleague to also elaborate on the other part.
And absolutely, and perhaps even touch on, I'm sure people will think about this.
Yeah.
You have all these different components. Is there a coordinating mechanism, one wonders?
Yes, there is. Just like Becca said, for me, the whole system of the juvenile system starts from arrest, putting the child on trial, and even post-trial. So it's a composition of different actors, but there's also coordination between the institutions that he mentioned, the judiciary, the Ministry of Justice, Department of Social Welfare, the prison system. So both actors are connected, and they have to work together for the system to work, and that is why the legal framework within which the juvenile system is hinged on, tries to create that connection between the institutions for the juvenile system to definitely work in the Gambia.
That's it. So who is the coordinating, is there something like a coordinating body, the coordinating authority? Is there such a thing?
When it comes to the justice administration, of course, you have the Ministry of Justice, that is the main government institution that is responsible for advising government on matters of on civil and criminal matters. And of course, the judiciary also plays a component role, because the judiciary has a specialized court in the name of the Children's Court that deals with matters of children. So we have different actors with different central roles, basically.
Absolutely.
That's where NALA also comes in. Like NALA also is also a part of the components of the juvenile justice system, because when it comes to representation, especially legal representation and advice, NALA is mandated by the Legal Aid Act to provide that representation for children. And the Children's Act, of course, makes a provision that any child who is charged before a court or who needs a legal representation, the government must provide a legal representation for that person. And NALA is the institution that is established by government to ensure the provision of legal aid and the administration of legal aid in this country is realized. So NALA is the institution that is established to administer legal aid services essentially in this country.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in addition to that, like Mr. Sawa said, you can see the Department of Social Welfare, try to it plays a very important role in the coordination in terms of providing direct services and also through referral to all the agencies and make sure, the child is served, adequate, justice and protection. And then also we have a national, child, child protection steering committee, the National Child Justice Steering Committee, which is chaired by our ministry, that is the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Welfare. I think just this morning we have a meeting. In this committee, you see that all the actors that are mentioned here, Justice, NALA, the court, the children's court, the police, child welfare unit, the prison service, like the juvenile wing, all of them are represented in this committee. And the committee has a term of reference, that also dictates as to what they should be doing in terms of coordination, just to make sure that, there's no gap in every area, just to make sure that all actors, play their role efficiently to make sure children, are given the adequate support and protection they need in the juvenile system.
Good. So then here, I'm inclined to ask, what is the difference between this child-friendly system and the conventional criminal justice system?
The difference basically is that, children are, you agree with me that children are vulnerable in every society, and there is always the need for the law to provide some measure of protection. And because of their status as vulnerable members of the society, their trial is usually different from adults. Because of this, for example, issues of reporting court proceedings when it comes to children is usually kept, it's usually held in camera because the public needs us to know because of the implication that may have on the reputation of the child and all that. And of course, when you also look at the method of sentencing a child, the law seeks to reform the child because of his incapable status in terms of the eyes of the law. So there is always that difference between how a court proceeding proceeds when it comes to a child offender and when it comes to an adult.
Yes.
And just to add on to that, even the terms used in the court, it's even different. Like in the children's court, you don't call a juvenile offender an accused person. Like in the other courts, like when you go into the adult courts, we refer to them as alleged child offenders. Like in short, we use ACOs. When an offense is proved against the child, we don't say the child is convicted. We don't say an offense is proved against the child and then an order is made against him either for maybe a supervisory service, or maybe an order is made for him to be detained at the Josiwang for him to reform. Like I said, essentially, because the essence, if you look at the work of our juvenile justice system, essentially, is not to punish the juvenile offenders. It's to help them to reform, to be good citizens of our society. So if you look at the whole system in itself, it is way, way different from that of the adults. Because even when it comes to, like Biso said earlier, even if they are arrested at the initial stage of the arrest, even before the police put them in the cell, the first thing they should think of is how to release them so that they can go back to their families, if they are not an immediate danger to themselves or to society. So these are some of the things that are different from when you look at the juvenile justice system and the other conventional court. It's way, way different when you look at the children's court and the other conventional court.
Absolutely, and this was going to take me to the next question. It was the key principles, but I think you've touched on them. Yeah. The law is supposed to be punitive, but reformatory, to reform. So can we just go through some of these key, as it were, principles that underpin this system? Anybody?
So one of the first principles generally when it comes to issues of children is the term best interest. What is the best interest of the child? Like Becca said, the criminal justice system looks at reforming, but in the reform process, of course, reformation is is usually in the best interest of not only a child but also an adult in certain instances. So when a child commits an offense, the whole point is you want to protect him or her. You want to make him or a better person in the future, so that you do not need to punish him for his actions in a way that would make his life difficult, but you want him to transition from where he was yesterday to something better. So the courts always focus on what is the best interest of the child. In what way can we protect this child in order not to go back to commit that same offense in the future? So that is the whole point of the criminal justice system when it comes to issues of children.
Yeah, absolutely. And then earlier on, you were talking about all these different components. So this transition, you know, it's almost like we're transitioning, aren't we? Trying to establish these structures that would ensure child-friendly justice system. How does it exist, these structures? How are they working in this country?
Well, I will say there are challenges, but I think, you know, we are working hard as different actors, you know, to make sure some of these challenges are addressed. You know, one will argue that, you know, there are a lot of, you know, challenges still now in terms of, you know, the time the children are arrested up to where they are kept, you know, and then also the court proceedings and so on until the time, you know, an order is given to the time that they are released and to be reunited with their families. There are a lot of challenges, you know, but I think, you know, as actors, you know, what makes it very difficult and it requires a specialized procedure is because children, by virtue of their age and you know, and maturity, you can realize that they're still on their learning ages. You know, probably some of them, that could be their first time of facing an authority. You know, and then children by nature could even be afraid of authority. So because of that delicate nature of children, you know, it requires a lot of, you know, issues to handle their own cases, because, you know, otherwise it could cause a lot of damage in their developmental, you know, growth. So basically the challenges has to do with, you know, capacity. Even at the police stations, you still realize that most police stations do not even have a place where they could detain children. You know, you realize that sometimes they are, you know, mixed with adults, and that could be very detrimental to them. You know, even the last meeting, some of them, even at the prison, sometimes you realize that sometimes even where they are to be taken to court, they are mixed with adults. And sometimes even as they are mixed, you can see some of the adults, you know, trying to impact some kind of knowledge or information on them, which may not be helpful. You know, and then also sometimes there are even, you know, information reaching that sometimes they could even be used as, you know, traffickers of drugs or whatsoever, you know, by adults. So those are challenges. And then up to today at the juvenile wing, you can see that there's no place for female juveniles. You know, at most in most instances they are to be taken to the shelter in Bakote. You know, those are all things, you know, that are still, you know, lacking. But I believe, as partners, we have been raising the issues and then discussing how to make sure some of these issues are addressed. You know, and I'm sure by now there are already some police stations that are trying to adjust to that level to make sure they have spaces, you know, for children. And then I can say, and then also by now almost all the police stations also have, you know, a gender and child welfare officer who are professionally trained to handle children issues. So I think these are some, you know, some good things that are coming up now.
Absolutely, but and again some constraints.
Yes.
And then which will take me to the courts, the children's courts. What is their mandate? How does it work?
So in terms of the law, I mean, the Children's Court is created by Constitution and also the Children's Act, which recognizes them as a specialized court that deals with matters of children. This ranges from both civil and criminal matters. So when there's an issue about a child in relation to either marriage, maintenance, contracts, for civil cases, they go to the Children's Court. Now when there's a criminal element involving a child, that also goes to the Children's Court. And even whereas a child is taken before the ordinary courts that we have, the court is given the mandate to refer the file back to the Children's Court, because it's a specialized court whose officials are trained particularly on matters of children. Like Becca said, in ordinary courts you would find that only a judge will preside over a case. But for the Children's Court, you would see that a magistrate would be there, a social welfare officer would be there, and someone with experience and someone who knows and has a very good understanding of children matter. So it's a species of its own when it comes to the court system.
Yes, and I suppose I'm going to have to ask this. It is well, fine, dandy, how you are describing it. That's how things should work.
Yeah.
One wonders, honestly, in reality, is that how it works? What do you think are some of the barriers why it cannot work that way?
Okay, I won't say barriers per se. If you look at the children's court now, especially now, then at Brikama we used to have issues, especially looking at the environment where the children's court was situated. But now they are in a very conducive environment, very secluded, where it's only the children's court that is there. And even at this place also, the one that is meant for carnifing, I believe now they are also transferred to the Future Lake building. Yeah. They now moved from the main magistrate court complex at carnifing there. So it's a very conducive environment now. And the panel members, the panel is correctly constituted. And then there is always a social worker, which is always important. And the court, especially the court chairperson, always take this into cognizance that if you are not a party to the proceedings, they ensure that you are always out of the court to ensure the privacy that the Children's Court, that the Children's Act provides for is always protected, because like Biso said earlier, Children's Court matters are always held in camera. So if you are not a party to the proceedings, you are always asked to leave the court premises. So I have seen it happening at Brikama, and it's the same thing here at Carnifing, especially now at their new complex. It's a very fine place. So I think improvements, there are still certain constraints, but I believe there has been a very, very, very good improvement recently, especially regarding the structure and the environment where the children's court sits.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And here let's focus a bit on children. we tend to use this term, the best interest of the children, and you know that in our society there are certain norms, certain parents will be doing certain things. Yeah. Well, in their own heads they're doing it, for the best interest of the child, even though we can all see that perhaps when they're sacrificing the longer term, as it were, interest. Yeah. Really, the best interest of the child, what does it entail? You had one from the Department of Social Welfare.
Yes. Okay, so the best interest of the child, has to do with making sure that whatever action you are taking or decision that you are taking on behalf of the child, it has to be something that will not expose the child to any further harm. You understand? Okay, that will enhance his development, that will enhance his protection as well. Okay, so basically it has to do with that. That is why, in fact, sometimes children, when they reach a certain age and maturity, sometimes, even as a parent, sometimes seek their opinion with regards to certain things, rather than just presuming, on your own and then doing things as you think is fitting. Sometimes that may not be in their best interest. So if we look at even also the way we do when it comes to the issue, because children's issues are delicate. For instance, children, sometimes when they are alleged of something, you could feel what they may go through. The stigma, the fear, the anxiety, the depression, and so on. And that could affect their development a lot. Example, if the child is a student, sometimes when they go to, children, that's how they are naturally. The child could go to school and the colleagues at the school will be pointing, oh, this was the girl who stole the mobile phone. You could see what the child might go through, withdrawn, and they find it very difficult to manage stress, or to manage certain difficulties when they are going it through, in a very, positive way. Sometimes this could lead to them adopting negative ways of coping with, their situation, and that could be hazardous. So that is why even with regards to their cases or whatsoever, the issue of confidentiality, you understand, is paramount. The issue of making sure that, they are not exposed to any other further harm as a result of our decisions or interventions is paramount. And then also making sure that even when it comes to talking to them, we have those kind of child-friendly interviews or techniques, that we use to be able to get information from them, and so on. Because sometimes when they find themselves in such a situation, sometimes they don't even want to talk about it. You need to employ techniques, they understand, to be able to get what you want from them. in that way you could help them. So it entails a lot, I know, but yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
that is why
Yes.
even in the court proceedings and throughout, the justice, procedure, you have the social workers visited the prisons regularly, the courts, not only them, but even the families, because that's psychosocial support, and then also trying to help in rehabilitating the children at the court and so on, so that when they go back, at least you could see that there could be changes in them. It's very, very paramount.
Yeah,
And then sometimes not just the child, but even the social networks of the child, the family, the environment, the peers. We try to look into all that. And where we realize that sometimes that is where the problem is, we try to engage some of those, partners and so on to make sure, the child is given the adequate support. Yeah.
Very multidimensional.
It's
There are so many
multidimensional.
actors, as it were, in there.
Yes.
But this is it. So this idea of the best interest of the child, when it comes to application, it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
I would love to hear from the person from the agency, the legal aid agency, and the law.
Okay.
I imagine that sometimes relationship with parents or guardians could be confrontational, because you want to apply one principle, but perhaps with them they're latching onto a different principle, or in fact have a different interpretation of the same principle. Isn't it?
Yes. Okay, from our perspective, especially from the defense perspective, when we talk about the best interest of the child, we look at a whole lot of things, especially if a child who is in conflict with the law and he is brought before the court. The first thing, especially if is someone who is going to school and he or she is dedicated, the first thing we looked at is for the person to be released, you understand, for the person, so that his school won't be affected, so that he can go back to school. Because imagine if the person is going through the court system and someone out there just hears about it, Mr. XYZ is absent from school today, or he has been absent for more than 1 week or 1 month because he is held in detention, or because he is going through the court system. That's why he has not been coming to school. Now that stigma that Sumari is talking about, it's now coming out, you understand. So these are some of the issues we looked at. And then looking at a child also, maybe like I said, why we say children are vulnerable, because some of them, they are victims of society. Imagine having a child who lives in an environment where you will have an uncle or a brother who will be sending you to go and buy cannabis, and then that child ended up being caught with cannabis, and then he is arraigned before the children's court by the drug law enforcement agency. So you see how children can be vulnerable, and how, like I said, they can be victims of society because of within the environment they live in. So the first thing we look at where he is from. In that instant, if he is from a society or from a home where such things, he is exposed to such things, then the court will look at these things and involve the social welfare, where the social welfare will come in.
But imagine in the children's court, how does it work? Would the child have a representation? Who represents the child's interest? How does it work?
Well, of course, I mean, in a constitutional setup, anyone who is charged with a crime in Gambia is presumed innocent until proven guilty. That same system applies. That same principle, and it's sacrosanct, and it applies when it comes to a child who is subject to the criminal justice system. So this would also mean that in fact, under the Children's Act, once a child is charged with an offense, it is the responsibility of the state to provide legal representation. And of course, we have the National Agency for Legal Aid, which is the state body that is responsible for providing that responsibility. And of course, they're doing a fantastic job. That one, no one would dispute, because they represent children from Banjul to Basse. I'm a prosecutor myself, so I can attest to that fact. So of course, that child has a right to representation, and the representation comes from NALA. And ordinarily, and in most times, children's court would not proceed unless a lawyer is present on behalf of the child. Of course, the child's family may decide to take a private lawyer, but the obligation lies with the state, and NALA discharges that function. And of course, it would be against the violation of the Constitution if the courts would proceed in the absence of the representation or legal representative of a child. So it's a very fundamental principle that is recognized both in the Constitution and also so in the Children's Act, and it applies across the board.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, just
okay,
to add,
I just want to
yes.
add on to that what Biso is saying. Our representation, especially in regards to children, is only not limited to criminal. In the event of an estranged marriage, you understand, where there is this divorce issue or maintenance issue, and a child is involved, you understand, and the court is concerned about the best interest of the child. So what the court should do is to order the National Agency for Legal Aid to provide representation for that child, to ensure his or her best interest is protected throughout that process. So this is a service that we also provide, and we provide advice when it comes to issues of child maintenance and then divorce, you understand, in respect of children, where the maintenance of a child is involved. His or her one of the parents, I don't want to say father or mother, one of the parents, it's out there, and he or she is able to provide that maintenance. Of course, we provide that representation and ensure that maintenance is provided to that child, to ensure the well-being and development of that child is well taken care of, which goes down to the root core of the best interest of the child. Yes.
Yes.
But it makes me wonder as well. Let me just ask this, and then you can continue.
Okay.
Who reports these cases? One can understand the stuff that get to the police, then you will have somebody. But the things happening at home, what's the experience? Is it the child running for help, or is it sometimes a concerned neighbor? Is it the parents? I wonder who reports these things. How is it done?
I think that's a very important question. Cases can be reported by anybody. It can be reported to any institution or person as well. Yes, sometimes cases are even reported to our office at the Department of Social Welfare or to the police, or even
let's go into the direct actors, really, that one must go to Department of Social Welfare, obviously, the police,
like
obviously.
Yes,
and
like for instance, most cases that has to do with, GBV or civil cases like maintenance, he alluded, or custody dispute between a estranged wife and husband. Most of those things sometimes are reported directly to our office. But at times they are reported to other agencies and they refer to our office. They refer those kind of clients or victims to our office.
So on the balance, this is like all the institutions reporting to you, or ordinary people. How much do ordinary people contribute to these reportings in your experience?
I think there's still that problem. It's like a lot of people still now don't even know what services social welfare provides. That is why most of the times you see people, they have issues disturbing them. They don't even report to anywhere, or most of the times they just report to the police, or at times other authorities can detect such kind of violations or children in danger, and they also report to our institution. But of recent, I think a lot of ordinary people are coming out to report to our ministry or sometimes other institutions. Yes, and then also just to strengthen that, since government cannot be everywhere, the department also, with support from UNICEF, is trying to establish as much as what we call CCPC in many communities, and ANWGs. The CCPC are Community Child Protection Committees. In a lot of villages now, even in the urban areas, we have some urban settlements where we have a CCPC, which is comprised of members from the village, they understand, and sometimes some people are incorporated, like a teacher, a doctor or a nurse in that committee, because sometimes they are the first people to come into contact with some of these issues, and they could always report to us as an institution. So if you go to a lot of villages now, you have those structures already established, and they are functional, and from time to time we organize some refresher training for them, for them to understand, to be more, sensitive about child abuses related matters, and how they could always report to us and other authorities. Yeah, and then, the other thing I was trying to talk about was the issue of representation, because apart from the legal representation, they have also the social aspect. All court sittings in the children's court are attended by social workers. Every day we have 2 people, going to every court, who are assigned to a court to attend the proceedings. Yeah, it's very important, because it's not only about the legal aspect of the child that one needs to look at. Children, when they are in such a situation, in conflict with the law, or in contact with the law, as whatsoever the case may be, it's also good to look at the social component. That is why social workers has to attend the proceedings, sometimes even give advice to the panel that is there to preside on cases. And then at times, a lot of cases will require a social inquiry report to be written. So the social worker, whenever the need arises, the magistrate will order the social worker or will assign the social worker to conduct a home visit to the family concerned and do an assessment. At the end of the day, they will write a report, for the court, and the report has to be done in the best interest of the child.
Absolutely, of course. I'm there. You've talked about some of the social norms that could be sort of working against, as it were, what you're doing. But there in the court, as you were just talking there, and I was wondering, now imagine the representative, the legal representative, believing one thing, the social worker maybe believing another. Do you sort of agree on the best line to take? One wonders about how decisions are arrived at. In the end, you have a magistrate or a judge, somebody in charge. One wonders, how does it work? You have to persuade these people, these adjudicators, of your case.
Certainly there has to be coordination between the two institutions, the legal representative and also the social welfare officer, because sometimes the dimension of your case as a legal practitioner may be a social issue, and so you would need to convince the magistrate to say, okay, this guy is not coming from a very good home, or is not coming from a very stable house, and therefore probably he committed this offense because of this reason, that reason, and so you can only gather those facts from the background check that is conducted by social welfare. So the legal representation works hand in glove with the social welfare officer. In fact, as part of your case strategy, that is something that you always have to look at. And that would also, even where the child is found guilty by the court, in seeking for mercy from the court, these are the factors that you would need to bring to the attention of the magistrate, so that leniency or justice can be tempered with mercy.
Absolutely, it is a more constructive engagement than anything else. So here and then, yes, whatever you want to say, just put in as well government's efforts in this whole, trying to create a child-friendly justice system. How would you gauge? How would you evaluate government's efforts so far? I wonder.
Okay, so far I believe the government is trying. Not enough is done, because, like I said, the child justice system in the Gambia needs a lot of work to do. Because personally, I looking at some of the juvenile offenders that I've represented, I like Bishop said, some of them are from very, very rough backgrounds, and they really need help. Like maybe some of them really needs to be moved from where they are and to be relocated to other families, and that can only be done by social welfare with the required capacity they have, because they always complain about capacity. And if you look at the Children's Act also, it made mention of probation officers. Like there should be probation officers. These are usually officers that assist the court, especially if a child is released, maybe an offense is proved against a child, and maybe the child is released on suspended sentence, then that's probation officer, you will be there to make sure and supervise that child. Or if a child is released on a supervisory order, that probation officer will be there to act as the eyes and the ears of the court to make sure that child conducts himself good in society. And if that child is asked to engage in a skill acquisition or do some other meaningful things for his reformation, like I said, like I said earlier, the purpose of our juvenile justice system is to help juvenile offenders reform. So for that child to reform, that probation officer needs to be there. But Sumari will bear with me. They have very few probation officers currently working at the Department of Social Welfare. So it is not enough. They are trying, but it is not enough. Still more needs to be done to ensure we have a proper juvenile justice system that will help not only coordinate with some of the activities with some of the actors, but to ensure the purpose we set up our juvenile justice system is achieved, and that can be only achieved if we have enough capacity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it seems every department,
Yes.
as it were, every agency, they're complaining of being underfunded and the rest of it. So, but this brings us to our next point. You see, you must have the best of intentions and with the laws and all the rest of it, but when you lack capacity, then to make the change, the result that you want. When it comes to results, we know that we never keep data. Do we evaluate? Do we have an objective, as it were, mechanism in place for us to be able to evaluate the results of our input? Do we actually know?
Yes.
The Department of Social Welfare.
Yeah.
What do you think? Results. How are we doing? How do we know?
Yeah. I think we have our own mechanisms as a ministry, because as far as the justice system is concerned, the ultimate objective is to make sure that we have, a robust system, do you understand, a responsive system in place that will be able to, ensure that children who are in contact or in conflict with the law, are, served with the, are served justice, and then they are also rehabilitated to be able to reintegrate back to society. Yeah, that is one of the most important objectives of the system. And then if you currently realize that the rate of children reoffending after being discharged by the court, I think it's alarming. They could bear me witness. We have our data. Usually we have our regional officers, even the prison office and other institutions from time to time. We organize, capacity training buildings for them, capacity building trainings, where they are trained on how to keep data and so on. Then on quarterly basis, those data are shared with us, so that at the end of the day, we could know where our strength is and where the weaknesses are. So those things are in place, and then we normally provide them, on quarterly basis, and then at the end of the year also, we'll have our annual, report, from the data that we collected. So basically, we can know, where the problems are and definitely where we definitely need to adjust on.
But that was an interesting point there. I mean, the rate of these
offending.
offending,
Yeah, I wanted to come
but
from
this is it, isn't it? This is
true.
where perhaps one might go, the significance of data, isn't it?
Yes.
Trying to find out why is it so, because obviously this must be integral to the strategy, isn't it? So that when they go out, they wouldn't return.
Yeah.
So this is really what the challenge is, isn't it?
Yes.
The challenge is certainly one of them.
I think one of the major challenges is about having a proper rehabilitation center, where some of these children that are in contact or in conflict with the law, and also even our prisons needs, a lot of reformations in terms of facilities, personnel, in terms of capacity, and so on, to be able to definitely, to be able to, rehabilitate, the children and reform them so that they can fit back to society in a manner that is productive and also in, in conformity with social standards. But those things are lacking, and I think that is where we definitely need to do more. And then the issue of resources is still a problem. Social workers or the probation officers sometimes, though they engage them at the prisons level, but at times having even the resources to the family, and then also to work on the other networks of the child. Do you understand? And making sure that the child is properly reintegrated. Sometimes those are still challenges. But just recently, we got support from our partners, because we have been crying to some of this. Some government cannot do it all. They are also there to complement government. Recently, we also secured some funds to make sure that, we are able to, the probation officers were able to do some assessment at the prisons, to know what needs those children, what are the needs of those children, and see how we could support them in their needs in terms of education or skills, so that we can support the reintegration. Because reintegration has to be sustainable, otherwise, they continue to, to behave otherwise, and they will always be, some in fact will take it as normal to go back to prison, which is unfortunate. Yeah. So we have a lot to do in terms of, making sure they are rehabilitated, and so that they can fit well into society.
Absolutely. And here, well, we take it for granted that we know, for the sake of the law, a child is when you're under 18, isn't it?
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But I wonder, do you sometimes sort of have incidents where children are tried in the normal criminal courts?
Yes, that usually arises when the child is charged with an adult. Let's say someone of 21 years committing an offense with someone with 17 years. They can be tried in the normal courts, and when, like, for example, a child commits the offense of treason, in that instance the child is tried in the High Court. But the beauty about it is that even when the child goes through the process of trial, at the point of conviction, the Children's Act requires that the High Court should remit the file back to the Children's Court, so that the Children's Court can determine on the appropriate punishment that should be carried out. So that re-emphasizes the point that the whole point of the criminal justice system when it comes to children is to reform. So because the Children's Court is a specialized court and it has a better training in terms of children matters, they are in a position to know the best approach to take when it comes to passing a judgment on a child. So it's possible and it's provided for under our law for a child to be tried in the usual courts.
That's it. So just one more question. So does it depend on the seriousness of the crime? For instance, a 13 or 14-year-old charged with murder,
it still goes to the Children's Court. Yes,
it still goes to the Children's Court.
Except treason.
Treason.
Except treason.
Treason is the only exception.
Yeah, that one, they don't want anybody to take them out of power.
Yeah.
Of course.
Treason,
So that's very interesting there.
Yeah.
So we are coming towards the end. So here we have to talk about the roles of parents, caregivers, caretakers, guardians, and stuff like that. Maybe I need to start with you.
I think
What's the role of parents in all of this?
the role of parents is even highlighted in the Children's Act 2005. There's a specific portion that talks about the role of parents as far as looking after the welfare of children is concerned. Parents must never shy away from responsibility. They are parental responsibility, and in fact, according to the Act, there are instances when parents should be held responsible for offenses that are committed by their children, especially if it has to do with their own negligence. So that is why parents has to, instill discipline in their children, make sure they are also, their welfares are looked into, in terms of feeding, in terms of shelter, and then also make sure they instill good culture and manner in them, respectful, and so on. Those things are very important. Try to understand also, try to also have, time with for their children, which is lacking, which is unfortunate for most, in most Gambian families. You realize that parents don't even have time for their children, which is very important. And that is why sometimes some parents will, it sounds very weird to them when they are called or informed that certain act or action was committed by their own child. It becomes a big surprise to them. This is all happening because we are not creating that, that bond between us and our children. We need to talk to them, we need to show them the way. We need to sometimes, interact more with them as much as possible, so that we'll know what they are, what they are doing, what they are up to. We'll be able to learn certain attributes in them, from them, and try to put them in the best way.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I always have saying that children should be seen but not heard.
Yes.
We have all these sayings. Spare the rod and spoil the child. Oh, God have mercy on these kids. But I wonder, really, the law. How many parents or guardians have been prosecuted because of what they've been doing to their children? Do we have many of those?
Yes, recently I did a case in the High Court where we charged the individual for murder. Unfortunately, we lost on the charge for murder, but the guardian was convicted for negligence to the child, because he left the child without attending to the child, and then unfortunately the child was said to have strangled himself and killed himself. So the judge said, okay, I'm not going to convict you for murder because we didn't have good evidence, but I cannot let you go because you failed in your responsibility. And I was also going to address that issue when it comes to offenders. I've seen an instance where I did a case with Nala as a prosecutor, and in fact we did not oppose to the bill. right, of the child, because the state recognizes that he's a child and needs to go back to school. But the parents were nowhere to be found. Interestingly, we could not even reach the children and the parents, and that was very sad, because it shows that there is that disconnect between the parents and the children. And of course there is a need for us to go back to African roots. Africans are always known to take care of their children.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's not that's a common factor that we have. But what is happening today is there is a huge disconnection between parents and their children, and that is why we continue to have children, particularly, and there's this area that people should focus on, is children abusing drugs. I believe that is a special topic of its own. But you would realize that parents have failed in their or many parents have failed in their responsibilities in taking care of their children, because a child leaving your house in the morning and you do not know where he or she is until the following day. I mean, there is no justification when it comes to parental responsibility. I mean, that is unacceptable. So really the law imposes an obligation on children to take care of their people, and I'm glad that people are now coming forward to make reports to the police in respect of parents who failed in their responsibility. And I think everyone needs to have that sense of direction, that sense of responsibility, because remember, children are the future of this country. If we cannot put the right things in their head at this point, then this country does not have a future. So it's an obligation, not just on the state, but also the people, the society, I mean neighbors, brothers, sisters, for us to guide our children and to ensure that the best comes out of them at all times.
Absolutely. I was going to come to that, this idea of it takes a village. Really, everybody has a role to play. I mean, we remember when we were kids in Banjul, for God's sake, every adult, everybody was a parent. You know, I could be from Perseverance and I go to have to do whatever. There's a parent there to tell me you can't do that. It seems that has been the breakdown. How do we... It's not for you really, but general discussion, maybe CSOs, NGOs, community groups. Perhaps this is something that we need to really recover, to rediscover, as it were.
I think we need to be associated. We need to go back to African roots. We need to reorient certain, especially the young parents, people really need to have time with their kids. I have done cases whereby in an instance, if I call a child's parent, I'm like, okay, your child needs to come to court tomorrow. His case is coming up. They will be like, I have not seen that child for 2 days, 3 days. I mean, like, you are going to bed, you have not even known where your child has been sleeping all these past days. It is really terrible. So this really shows how disconnected most of them are with their parents. So you can imagine the kind of things they'll be doing outside, even without the knowledge of their parent. Some of them will be in detention without the knowledge of their parent. It is us who will be informed by the police. Well, this child that you are defending at this court, he is arrested again and then taken to, and then I have to call the parents again. Hey, I heard your kid is arrested, and he said he's at the police. They'll be like, I have not seen him for the past 3 days. So they have to go rush back there, and then I have to go and do something again to make sure he is released or something good is done about him for his best interest. So we really, especially in this generation, parents are really disconnected with their children. I think we need to revive that African roots. Let's have time for our kids. What I used to know in our house, after Maghrib, it is family time. We sit together, watch TV. My parents don't go to bed without me getting at home. Yes, even then I have to be caned, which is now prohibited. But this is what used to happen. Yes, they don't go to bed without me getting at home. Yes, this really shows parental responsibility and care, and this is a fundamental requirement in the Children's Act. Parents need to provide care, protection, and maintenance of their kids. Now, if you don't look after your kids, like you don't know where he or she sleeps, are you not failing in your care? Are you not failing in your protection? Maintenance also, are you not failing in it? Obviously, I think we need to take the bull by the horn. And of course, my colleagues from MOJ will start prosecuting some of the parents for failing in their responsibilities.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And the other part, we have to go to the Department of Social Welfare. It seems like you've got your work cut out for you. So what is this strategy? How do you deal with that? Because I'm sure the raising awareness aspects must come into it. And really, you must carry the community with you. how do you go down to the community and try to influence attitudes? You've got a huge job to do.
Yeah.
What's your strategy? What does the future look like?
Well, I think the future looks bright. Yeah, right now, I think since 2011, we have regional structures in all the regions. This is just to make sure we decentralize our services and so on, so that also the community felt us even at the grassroots level. Okay, sometimes certain things does not require you to come all the way to Banjul just to, be attended to. Okay, we have regional structures, and the new approach now is from the regional structures, we are even going to have local structures in every region at district level, where we'll have, social workers posted, just to be closer, to the society. So that's the approach, and then also just to create more awareness. I think now people are becoming more and more aware of our services and our existence than ever before. Because right now we used to have a lot of activities now. Some of them will even conduct it with our stakeholders. We go with them to the field, to engage communities at the village level, sensitize them about, the role of social welfare, the role of the other partners, and what they can do if there is a case or an issue where they can report to, what number they could call, because we even have a child helpline. That is the 199. Anybody could call, for free.
Is it 199?
199. It's a free toll number. So those things are in place, and not just going to the communities, but also we use the media. Like this one, today we are invited by Nala. The next day we invite them too, on radio programs or TV, and sometimes even the community radios. All of them, we use them to engage more, to have more engagement with the community, to sensitize them about our role, about child protection, and so on. And I think the attitude is changing, the trend is changing.
Absolutely.
Positively.
Nice. We're coming towards the end. Your final remarks from the National Agency for Legal Aid.
Okay. Essentially, from our end, like we all know, we are really incapacitated when it comes to funding and personnel. But we have been doing our best, like my colleague said. We have been doing extremely well when it comes to defending children in the children's court, and then doing the other aspect also, providing advice and then help draft processes for others who are seeking maintenance, and then or certain custody issues where in an estranged marriage is in an estranged marriage and the interest of a child it's involved, especially because in certain instances some people might think, okay, it is the best interest for a boy child to go and live with the father, while in certain, if you look at the circumstances or you do the background check with the help of a social worker, that may not be the best interest. So in such instances, of course, with the help of the social worker, doing the background check and all those things, it goes to the mother. But with our agency, we are really constrained, like I said, and we've been doing our best in representing children, and we will continue to do that, especially with the support from our able partners, the UNICEF and other stakeholders. Yes.
Absolutely. And finally, the State Council.
Yes, well,
from your angle, your final remarks.
Well, yeah, for me, I think, like Becca said, there is need on the part of every stakeholder to put in effort to ensure that the child justice system works. The courts need to be updated. The courts need to be given more facilities such as computers, printers. I mean, even have a system of electronic system, court system that would make the work easy, because you realize a magistrate recording every proceeding by writing it down, it consumes a lot of time. And of course, NALA also needs to be upgraded they need to be giving a lot of opportunity, a lot of help in terms of more lawyers and finances. And of course, you come back to the prosecutors as well. More training is needed for prosecutors, more facilities are needed, just so everyone is familiar with the criminal justice system and how children are to be prosecuted. Because like Sumare said, issues of children are very delicate. So you need to have people who are trained, who are seasoned, and they must be able to, deal with the affairs of children in a manner that is efficient, because the intention of the law is that when it comes to cases of children, it has to be dealt with as quickly as possible. So with all these bottleneck challenges that we have, I think we can do it as a country if only we have a clear trajectory that we want to pass through.
Yes.
Yeah.
And any
Yes,
final
finally, I think on my behalf, I just want to thank Nala for the invitation, and then also UNICEF for supporting this program. I also want to thank the department for giving me the opportunity to come and represent them here. You know, I think the future looks bright now with the new ministry, because our ministry is very new, just barely 2 years now. So the issue of children will be given, you know, greater priority now, you know, so that, you know, most of the things we are facing now, I hope in the soonest time possible, will be a thing of the past. Thank you.
yes, just 30 seconds.
Yeah, before we conclude, I want to thank our partners, UNICEF, for supporting this program, and other programs, of course, to advance the best interests of children in our juvenile justice system. We are really grateful for supporting this program.
Thank you very much. That was Bekai Saidi, who is a legal officer at the National Agency for Legal Aid. And sitting on my immediate right, there was Mr. Sumare Modu Sumare, who is a protection officer at the Department of Social Welfare. And sitting on my left here, this is Mohamed B. Sow. He's a state counsel representing the Gambia Bar Association. Thank you very much, viewers. You were just watching a special program by NALA and UNICEF, which is called the National Agency for Legal Aid, which is part of their child-friendly justice system awareness project in the Gambia. Until next time, I'm Mamadou Mbodj. Goodbye.